Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and welcome back to my shop. It's been a busy off-season, and today we're going to do work on a Penn Senator 3.0 high speed, or the Penn Senator Special 3.0. This one differs from the black-sided Penn Senators that ruled the day in that it has the Jig Master gearing in this as opposed to the Long Beach. So it's a bigger gear which drives the high speed, which makes this attractive when trolling and when working with big fish. It also has a compact frame, so you can load some heavy wire in there but not worry typically about frame twist. And overall it's a nice reel. Now ahead of this video I did clean this reel up. And if you want to see how to work with corroded metal and cleaning up a reel, I did a video on that one a little bit earlier. But that reel looked like its cousin over here, the Penn Senator 4.0 Special. And the major difference in this one, other than line capacity, is that this one is a bearing-driven reel as opposed to bushings. So on the 4.0 Senator, you have a bearing on each side, larger capacity. And this one sits between the 3.0 Senator and the 6.0 Senator. Watch for this one. This will be up soon in terms of the repair. But you can see on this one there was a lot of tarnish on the metal parts. There's old line on there, some corrosion that would need to be cleaned up, and I'll do this one on a future video. But for today, a customer brought both of these reels in, and I'm going to show you how to work on tuning up the metal parts in the interior here, how to properly lube this. If it needs drags, we'll go ahead and show you the drag service, and we'll get started on this one. So I like this reel. It's been around a long time. It's proven out there in the on the ocean, and it lasts for a long time if you keep it properly maintained. So I'm going to start by taking off the handle. I always like to do that to get to the gear side. To do that, I take the set screw out, and then I use a handle wrench. You'll notice this handle wrench is not the one that came with the reel. Penn supplies a handle wrench that looks like this. You can go ahead and use this if you have that. If you work on a lot of reels, you might want to go get this one. It's an aftermarket one. It's available. A lot of customers, a lot of viewers have asked where it's available. It's available through pennparts.com. It's not a Penn product, but it's available there. I believe it's Alan Tahani makes it. But at any rate, it's a little bit thicker, a little bit easier, and a little bit more longer so that you have some leverage. So I took the handle off. Now I'm taking the star drag off. And one of the things I like to look at early on when I'm doing a reel is, where is the ferrule here? Because if the ferrule looks like this, and you have that gap maybe 1/8 of an inch or something, it tells you got good drags in there. If you can't see the ferrule, chances are you're going to have to replace the drags. If the drags are needed, you would go ahead and order them. Two sources. I always seem to use pennparts.com. Pennparts.com has basically all of the parts available to you for Penn reels, even going back a long way. There are some obsoleted parts, and in those cases you have to look elsewhere, but for the most part drags are commonly available there. The drags cost about $1.50 each plus shipping, so for a reel, if you wanted to get the metal and the fabric and have the shipping, it's probably about probably $15 or so US. So I'm taking the side plate screws out now. One of the differences between the high-speed Senators and their cousin, the original 3.0 Senators, is that the side plate comes out all with external screws. On the black-sided ones, you have just a single screw anchoring here, and then when you pull the side plate off, you would actually have the metal frame inside, and you'd have to work that side plate off of the metal frame to get to the last two screws if you wanted to remove all of the posts. Okay, so I've taken the side plate off. Here's your spool and your non-gear side plate. And for general servicing, the first thing I do is I put a little bit of grease, and I use a blue grease. This one happens to be Penn's blue grease. But I use a blue grease in that bushing there, which accommodates the back end of the spool. So a little bit there, and then a little bit on that little clicker there. and just to keep it. I noticed on Penn reels one of the deficiencies is when salt water gets in here a lot, this clicker on some of the older reels rusts, and you're done there. Okay, so that's all you have to do on the non-gear side, and I like to also put a little bit of blue grease onto the spool shaft that's going to go into the spool gear. So we can set that aside now, and we'll go over and we'll work on the gear side. So on the gear side, you have to take the trim ring off. You'll notice that the big gear in the bottom here sits below that trim ring and has to come off. In some of the other Penn reels, and you'll notice this looks a lot like any of the other Penn reels that you take off. Credit to Penn for using the same design on most of that. But in some of these, that gear sits above and you don't have to touch that. An example of that would be the Penn Long Beach series. So I'm going to take that trim ring off. You'll notice that I'm putting all of my parts in a parts bucket. I like to keep them all there so I know where to find them when I reassemble. It's a good time now to tell you, if you don't work on reels frequently, if you're not familiar with the design, to take pictures along the way so that you know how to reassemble this if you get lost in trying to put this back together. All right, to get to the gear bridge plate, there's 4 screws that attach it. Those are the corresponding 4 screws coming through the back here. You'll notice I'm wearing a latex glove as I take this off, and I'm cupping my hand. I like to use the glove to keep contaminants like the oils and lubricants that are in the reel off of it as much as possible. And I'm cupping it because when you take this reel off, it has what I call a boing factor. That is a spring in there that can shoot out and go boing, and then you're in trouble if you don't have a replacement or if you can't find where it went. So if you do it this way, kind of back the screws off until you feel the bridge separate. I think I just felt it now. Just push through lightly, as one of these is still attached. Push through lightly, there we go. And cup your hand, and generally that spring does not shoot. That spring belongs to the anti-reverse dog, and we'll show you how to put that back in as we service it. Okay, so I've pushed it through. There it is. That's the spring I'm referring to here. It's an anti-reverse dog spring. It goes into my parts bucket, and here's your anti-reverse dog. So this looks like what I've seen on the outside. Looks like the drag stack is fine. We'll go ahead and service that. There does seem to be a lot of accumulated buildup on this anti-reverse dog, which could impede the performance. That's the one that stops the reel from backpedaling, so I just cleaned that off. And we'll start up top on this one. A lot of the annual services that come in, it simply needs lubrication. A lot of them are dry. Some of them have accumulated junk, so you can see on this reel, hopefully you can see on this reel, there's quite an accumulation of grease on that inner housing there. So we'll go ahead and clean that up. So you start by pressing down on the transition piece for the free spool release. And then, you press down on the gear, slide the free spool release up, take the transition piece off. That's followed by the gear and the collar, the spool gear and the collar. And if you're familiar with Penn reels, you see that this is quite similar in nature to a Jigmaster, to a Penn Long Beach, to most of the conventional reels. The design just doesn't change much. So I'm now cleaning out that accumulated grease that's around the housing. If you saw my video on how to set up your desk for a repair, 2 of the things I commonly recommend are Q-tips and paper towels, because most of the time it's just cleaning like that that's required. You may also need some steel wool or scrubby pads to get at some serious corrosion or buildup. These are wiping off, so there's no need to do that. And you want to make sure as you're doing your reels that all of the parts are clean, and if there's any corrosion, that you make them smooth, because that's what makes the reel operate smooth at the end. Okay, so once we do that, all we need to do is grab that blue grease again, put a little bit of lubrication onto the bushing that holds the spool, a little bit up top in terms of the free spool release mechanism. We go back and we grab those springs, and again, I didn't put these in the parts bucket because I know I was going to go right back in and put this together. But if you're afraid of knocking parts around, go ahead and put them in that parts bucket and then grab them out a couple of minutes later. Okay, so we did that. And then I'm just going to check this gear here. There's two things that happen with Penn gears. This ring comes off frequently, so you want to make sure that that's set properly. The other thing is sometimes line gets in there and chews up the teeth. So that's what I'm looking at now to make sure that the teeth on this gear are okay. They are, so I'm just going to put a little bit of blue grease on that. Put that back into the collar. Put the collar on here as it came out of. And just kind of reversing the steps on how we took it out. I'm going to press down on the gear so that it sits on that, that bearing, and then we're going to just slip this back over it. And again, this looks very much just like a Jigmaster's setup there if you've worked on a Jigmaster. Important note here, there's an indentation in this side of the spool gear. Make sure that the indentation is facing out. There's enough room here that you could actually flip that around. If you did, the spool would not engage. Okay, we're done with this side. We're going to come over to the drag stack. This should be nice and clean. Because I'm looking at it, you should have new gears in there. If you needed new drags, you could get them from Penn Parts as well. Again, pennparts.com is the online resource for that. Make sure that you go ahead and get the right parts for your reel in order to have it perform properly. Okay, there's a hardened kind of a plastic washer that sits beneath the main gear. Just checking that one, taking it off. This is a good time to check all of the teeth on the main gear to make sure that those are not damaged. They aren't. You can also do the same thing we just did with that spool gear a little bit. You don't have to overload. It'll work its way in as it cranks around. Put a little bit of blue grease on that, set that back in. And before I set that back in, I noticed that last drag there. Last drag is sitting in the gear, so we want to take that out, make sure it gets lubed. There you go. All right, so back in with that main gear there. Okay, for drags, I use a drag grease. In this case, this is Cal's Universal Drag Grease. And with fabric drags, you want to make sure that you keep them lubricated so that they stay flexible. And to do that, you use a drag grease like I'm using here. You can work that on a little bit, push it in with your fingers. You don't have to over lube, but you do want to make sure that it gets lubed. You want to make sure that these are clean, and they are. So it goes fabric, then it goes metal. Fabric again, we're going to go do the same thing here. We're going to lube these up, work them in a little bit with our fingers there. And again, that's another reason why these latex gloves work well. Then the middle one is always the one that has the ears on it, and they sit into an indentation in the main drive. Put those on. Last of the fabric drags then, and again, these are in good condition, but if you found that they were worn and you've already had your reel out to do the basic service on, then go ahead and spend the extra $10 or $15, go get the new drags for it, and you'll be ready for the year to come. Okay, that's that one. Last of the metal, and there's the collar that sits on top of that so that the ferrule rides ahead of that. So the last piece of lubrication that we need then is just a drop of oil on that shaft that holds that together, and we're ready to reassemble the bottom of this. So on the bottom of this, it's kind of a little bit of a trick, but it's common to all of the Penn reels. We have the 4 screws. On the screws, there's 2 different screws. There's a threaded screw, a fully threaded screw, and a partially threaded screw. The partially threaded screw goes up top where you saw those springs. The bottom has the fully threaded screws, and on the fully threaded screws, that's where that anti-reverse dog rides. So in order to reinstall, we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to press down on this and make sure that that gear gets seated onto the bushing. We're going to turn the bridge upside down and then a quarter of a turn. And then we're going to take a fully threaded screw through the available hole that's open on that side. We're going to take the anti-reverse dog, and that's the situation that it sits in upwards with that notch. And then the notch that forms behind the anti-reverse dog and the plastic casing is where that small screw comes from. And again, this is a spring. You want to be very careful with that, and you want to make sure it's properly seated, and you want to make sure you have your fingers on it because there's times when you may just move it and not catch that ridge there, and it'll shoot out. So be very careful as you're reinstalling that spring. Once you've reinstalled the spring, you do the rest of the quarter turn till you see the screw line up with that hole in the side plate. And then 1 or 2 turns, just get it seated. You don't want to tighten this one down fully. You want to go back and put the other screws in before you go down and tight. So in this case, this is the screw that's partially threaded. That goes up top, and again, that smooth surface is where the spring rides on. So you want to make sure you got that. And I do this in an X pattern. I do here, and then I go up, come down and over. So fully threaded on the bottom. And then I'll come over, set the other one. And sometimes the spring catches the screw on the way in, so you just have to play around with it a little bit, but eventually you'll get it seated. Okay, so now I can tighten them all up because I have all 4 seated. And you do that so that you don't get, I don't have all 4 seated. You do that so that you don't have poor torsion going on in there. And these are tightly, have tight specs to them. That's why you have to be going in the X pattern. You have to make sure that they're all partially tightened down ahead of time. And if you find that the screw is out of alignment by looking through on that back part of the plate, as we did, as I showed you earlier, how these things sit, then you want to come back to that and back off the other screws until you can get that seated. Nothing wrong, it happens all the time. Okay, so once we do that, I'm going to do a quick turn here. You seem to be okay with that. Yep, we're okay, so let's go ahead and reassemble. So the only piece that I'm missing here from a lubrication standpoint is a little bit of blue grease on this transition piece. So I go ahead and put that on. Now we're reversing the process back out. We get the chrome ring, line the holes on that chrome ring. Take the body with the spool, it's already been lubricated. We're going to go ahead and put that back on. Line those holes with the, I don't have that ring set quite right. I use a little pin to center if that's the case. Or in this case, I think we're just going to take it off and move it over a little bit. Patience is one of the things required in real servicing. Little things with tight engineering specs need to be properly accounted for. Don't try and ever force screws. All you're going to do is break something or cause the reel to go out of alignment and cause problems downstream. Always take your time and go back and make sure that you're feeling the right sets on these. Okay, that should be good. There we go. And again, just like the... There we go. Alright, so just like the other ones that we did on the bridge, we're going to do a cross pattern. Kind of northeast, southwest on these in terms of getting the screws set before we tighten them all down. So I'll go there, and then I'll go to one of the ones on the bottom into the reel seat. Those have short screws. So again, take pictures as you bring these out, but there's 2 short screws that go on the bottom. There's 4 long ones. They are different in length. You want the short screws on the bottom so that they don't protrude from that reel seat. Alright, so I'm going to put the other reel seat screw in. Then I'm going to go east and west. I'll go over to the one side on this post. Again, I'm not tightening them down fully. I'm just making sure that they're seated. You don't want to put too much torque onto a reel until you have them all squared up there. And I'm going to go west on this, go to the other side of the reel, put a screw in there, and you can see how convenient this reel parts bucket becomes. All the pieces and parts are sitting in there. I don't have to look around on the table to find out where it may have gotten knocked to or inadvertently placed. If you make it a habit. It's a good one to learn as you go about taking these reels off, and it'll save you countless minutes and hours over the course of doing these. Okay, so we're set up now. I'm going to go back and tighten all of these. Again, I'm going to tighten these in that alternating pattern, and I only left maybe a quarter of a turn on these. All right, we're all set. All right, next up is the collar that goes onto the bridge here. I'm going to go put the star drag on. These are always a little bit a challenge getting it squared up on that first one. There we go. We're good. If you need a little help holding it, use a Phillips head with a little bit of tension until you can clear it for the handle. In this case, I can clear the handle, and you can work on tightening that down. And we go to the handle nut. And again, if you work on these a lot, I would recommend going to get that aftermarket parts wrench. If you work on these once a year, you can work with the wrench that Penn provided it. Or if you just don't want to go get this, that's fine. But I find that this is very convenient, particularly when you're working on hundreds of reels like I do in a regular season. So, okay, so line that up with that hole for the set screw. We put that set screw back in. That'll keep that handle nut from turning. And we're done. So that's a nice turning reel. It's you back that drag off a little bit, and I always recommend when you're not fishing the reel, back the drag off. Save the drags. If you compress that and don't back them off after you use them, then what's going to happen is it's going to squeeze that lubrication out of the drags that we just put on there. So since we were working on a little bit of oil, my last piece before I hand this off to a customer is just to kind of wipe off that excess grease that's on the reel. And I'm going to go install, you've seen I have a reel tie down, I'm going to go ahead and install that after the video is over. So again, I hope this is helpful. If you have the 3.0 Senator high speed, you saw how to do that. If you have the 3.0 non-high speed, the only difference is going to be that the drag stack and the washers is going to be shorter. And when you get down here to take the side plates off, there'll be one screw, not 3 screws on the bottom of this during disassembly. So if it's been helpful and you like the videos, please indicate that on the video screen. If you want to see more of these, please subscribe to my channel. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.